Hello, it's Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist. Thank you for joining me again. Another classical clip from the Atheist Experience. I'm not going to make you suffer for the whole clip, which is about 25 minutes long. One caller, Timothy, calling in. I think this is from 2020 or 2019. Yeah, Timothy's calling in saying that a Christian worldview has more explanatory power than an atheist worldview. Something which actually is very easy to demonstrate that it's false, but which the hosts do very well, really, for those 20 minutes. And eventually, of course, the question is, what reason do you have to believe that any of this, that it's true anyway? And he goes to the resurrection of Jesus, which is supposedly a historical event and so amazingly convincing, and that historians have said it happened, etc., etc., etc. All the evidence is there. You just got to look in the Bible. There are certain clues in the resurrection account, the side being pierced, Jesus' side being pierced by a spear, etc. And it reminds me a bit of this video I made a few days ago about the false dichotomy, which is the fine-tuning explanation and or the multiverse. Like it's a false dichotomy. There are other choices, that there are other options. There may be other options, but a lot of Christians hold on to this view that it's got to be fine-tuning, because having millions of universes until one finally gets the right combination of natural forces is just so unrealistic. I think I'll go with fine-tuning. So one example of false reasoning, and we're going to see another one here. So with a really hilarious end. We often get this, these long calls that end abruptly. It's nice and polite, and I respect you guys. Don't agree with you, atheists, but I enjoy watching your show, and I think you're doing a good thing, etc. And blah blah blah. This sort of mutual patting each other on the back, and then the whole thing just goes. The Christian will usually leave having had his face slapped with reason, and go off sulking or be completely humiliated, probably wishing they never called in the first place. And this is one of those calls, really. So let's just go with it and see what happens.
Evidence.
Well, I wouldn't say there's no evidence besides the historicity of Christ and the claims made from Christ. However,
okay, claims are not evidence, though. Those are two completely different categories of things.
Oh, you're right. I guess claims might have been the wrong word to use. Okay. The weight of the existence and the things that were beyond explanation that happened at that time.
Okay, so in order for...
This is typical Christian reasoning. Things which are beyond explanation. For example, the natural world which manifests before us. It's beyond explanation how life could be so complex and diverse, etc. So I'll just go with the Creator God. Ultimately, obviously, the fallacy there is argument from ignorance.
For me to accept that there are things that happen that are beyond explanation, I have to agree with your conclusion, right? You're trying to get me to agree with your conclusion. This is a circular argument.
By the way, if things are beyond explanation, then you can't propose that there's an explanation. I just want to throw that in there.
Good point.
Hey, this is unknown, and I know what it is. That's ridiculous.
Let me clarify. Beyond naturalistic explanation.
Right. But there is no evidence that anything without a naturalistic explanation happened unless I agree with your conclusion.
Not necessarily, no.
Okay, so what is the evidence that something that can't be explained naturally happened? Other than claims, which we agree are not evidence.
And go for two, because we got callers to go to. Just no more than two.
Okay. I would say some of the two of the primary things would, and I know you've already talked about this hour, would be the resurrection and the unique nature and novel nature of that after 3 days, and even details that were laid out about him being stabbed in the side with water and blood coming out, which we know shows that this person who was being attested to actually died on the cross.
Or that the person writing about it was familiar with crucifixion. or death.
Brilliant. I mean, that just nailed it. That just completely debunked his point. Let's just go on and see what happens. It's odd that Christians seem to think that Jesus was the first person that was ever crucified, or that a creative gospel writer, to add some authenticity to the story, might decide to put in one or two juicy details, like being stabbed in the side and water and blood coming out of the hole, because he's seen crucifixion. But you know, people were crucified by the hundreds, obviously back in those days. But oh no, this is an authentic detail proving that the resurrection really happened.
Or stabbing people.
That detail, to throw that in there, isn't inconsequential. It's not like they necessarily knew that.
Right. But it's not like the only way they could have known that is to watch Jesus specifically be stabbed on a cross.
Are you suggesting that nobody knew that after you run out of blood, you bleed water until Jesus?
No.
So we knew that beforehand. And so now are you saying that they only included that data because it actually happened and not just because they possibly wanted to convince people it happened?
I mean, are you saying that they knew that that was a sign that the person had already died back then? That they're
well, it doesn't say that it's a sign that the people already died back then.
I mean, this thing about the water coming out of the side. The issue is not whether Jesus was crucified or not. The issue is as to whether he died and then came back to life. So, in a way, it's fairly, in a way, sort of pointless having this discussion.
Then it just simply says that it happened. All it would take is someone at some point having observed that happen. And of course, we all agree that Jesus wasn't the only person ever crucified or stabbed in the side with a spear. Right? That's been going on for quite a while. This was a known thing about human beings when they die.
At that time?
Yeah, yes. People had stabbed people before Jesus.
No.
This is bizarre. In the modern world, we're not used to seeing people stabbed. Well, where I live, I'm not used to seeing people stabbed anyway. And in those times, in ancient times, seeing people's skin pierced with swords and spears and what have you, actually I would have thought was fairly common because of the way they punished in those days and the fact that people would turn out to see people, killed or executed. So, I think it's very common knowledge in those days.
I'm asking about the specific details about the water and the blood.
Right. But that is not presented in the Bible as proof that he was dead. It's simply an observation that exists in one of the Gospels.
Exactly, and it's an interesting observation considering they didn't necessarily have that knowledge at the time.
Holy shit! I literally just asked you this fucking question.
Yeah. I mean, 2 minutes before in the conversation, they already agreed that, this had happened before in crucifixions and that it was fairly, it was common, it was knowledge, and that it's not really interesting or spectacular at all that a gospel writer would have actually put it in. And then he comes back to it at the end. And that's just unbelievable. After they already covered that ground, and he sort of conceded it already, and then he comes back and says the same thing again.
I literally just fucking asked you if nobody knew about bleeding water until Jesus, and now that's the game you're playing. Goodbye.
Oh dear. So you see, 25 minutes that call was, and we only find out right at the end there how either he's not paying attention, or he's so entrenched in this delusion that he's got, or this flaw in his reasoning, inability to properly question what he thinks is a piece of evidence there. And it's no evidence at all, because it's certainly no evidence that Jesus rose from the dead, and it's neither is it evidence that Jesus was actually crucified. If I was writing a gospel story, I would put in as many authentic looking details as I possibly could. Let me know what you think of that. I'm going now. Hope you enjoyed that clip. I'll be back again soon. Bye.